diminishes its light.
King Durin.
Enough! I will not risk dwarven life.
Unexpected that Gimli from Lord of the Rings and Durin IV from Rings of Power are related, given their similarities. Gimli, a dwarf warrior who was first seen in the Peter Jackson film trilogy and the books, is a beloved character among readers because of his humor and selflessness. He was first introduced as a member of the Fellowship of the Ring. It appears that this is a generational trait because Rings of Power, the prequel series on Prime Video, features several similar mannerisms displayed by Durin IV, the Dwarven Prince of Khazâd. The royal ancestry of Durin IV is openly discussed in Rings of Power, Seasons 1 and 2, and the appendix of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings confirms that Durin is descended from the highly esteemed Durin I, one of the most senior dwarven rulers and the founder of Khazâd. The connections between the two may not be as clear because Gimli's past, while canonically hinted at, isn't really explored in the movies. Nevertheless, by gaining the respect of their relatives and the other communities, both characters are important for fostering relationships outside of the dwarf community. Gimli can be considered a distant relative of Durin IV because his father Glóin comes from the Durin line of the Dwarves of Erebor. Among the 7 different types of dwarves, or Khazâd, these were the ones who lived beneath the Lonely Mountain. These dwarves, whose leaders belonged to the House of Durin and were thus also referred to as Durin's folk, have additional background information available in Tolkien's anthology, the Silmarillion. The fabled Durin I was the first king of this dwarf lineage. Durin I, the father of the dwarves, was the oldest, having lived for over 2,300 years. Gimli, Thorin, and Durin from the Lord of the Rings series. Rings of Power is set at least 4,959 years before the Lord of the Rings, so just because Gimli can trace his ancestry back to Durin doesn't mean that he's descended from royalty. One of Thorin Oakenshield's 4 third cousins, Gimli is the son of Glóin, who is first seen in The Hobbit as a companion. Even during his lifetime, Thorin, who is a direct descendant of Durin I, held the title of King of Durin's folk. In accordance with Tolkien's Appendix A on Durin's folk in the Two Towers, Gimli was a royal and distant descendant of Durin I, and by extension, Durin IV in Rings of Power himself. Despite not being Gimli's biological relative, The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Season 2 has introduced another canon dwarf character. However, there is a connection here. Tolkien's appendices attributed the creation of the Doors of Durin for the West Gate of Khazâd to Narvi, played by Kevin Eldon. Naturally, Gimli made his first visit to his ancestors' house through these doors in The Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring, and these are the doors that the Fellowship had to declare friend to. Celebrimbor, who was first introduced in Season 1 of the Rings of Power, assists Narvi in creating the Door of Durin. This dwarf is responsible for the friendly relationship that is developed between Khazâd and the Elves of Erebor. The Prime Video series will undoubtedly delve deeper into this. Of course, little did they know that centuries later, in The Lord of the Rings, Gimli and Legolas would enter that very door together, reigniting the friendship between elves and dwarves through the descendant of Durin.